Bedat. You're listening to the Women Power Podcast, a subsidiary platform to the Women Power Summit, the largest event in MENA, with the aim of empowering women and helping them achieve their absolute highest potential. Each week on the Women Power Podcast, you will hear honest, vulnerable, authentic, real conversations from inspiring women. These women will share their experiences and stories into what it takes to build a successful business and career. The podcast will share insight and inspiration and hopefully inspire action and lead change. Side note, even though we are all at home, we wanted to bring you valuable content. So this episode of the podcast is brought to you over Zoom. Please bear with the sound quality. Thank you. Fatema Ebrahim is the CEO and founder of Andra Public Relations, a public relations and corporate communications firm that consults FinTech corporates, startups, financial institutions, and more. Under Andra's initiatives, the team runs the annual FinTech series in partnership with the Capital Club in Bahrain. Fatema was heavily involved in the startup space in New York, working with award-winning startup Kip & Hall, and has a vast network with entrepreneurs in the USA. In February of 2018, Fatema was appointed by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince to be part of the new board of directors for the Bahrain Economic Development Board, making her the youngest female board member in Bahrain. In addition, Fatema is a board member and the public relations director of the Women in FinTech initiative. Welcome, Fatema. I wanted to ask you, how are you doing during this time during COVID? And also, have you been anxious at all? Have you had any bad days?
Surprisingly, during this time, I've unlocked a better way of using my time. I'm allocating more hours of the day to different things I haven't done before or tried. I'm not in such a rush anymore because of the situation. So it's kind of been a blessing as well. It made me really reflect, wow, Fatema, you have so much room right now. How are you going to fill it up? So when you think about it, waking up, going to an office, running errands, being constantly on the move takes a lot of your energy and time, but all of that to be limited kind of makes you focus on other activities that you've never really focused on before. So having the time to be personalized in my outreach, whether it's for work or whether it's personally with my friends, learning new tools and experimenting. I've been experimenting a lot. And those are things like our first webinar, taking a social media design course, catching up with myself mentally, emotionally. I don't have time to do that. I've actually also been taking boxing classes. It feels good to kind of look back and be like, oh, I did a few new things today, and the rewards will definitely come in due time in the next couple of months.
So when you say experimenting with new things, can you tell us, other than boxing, what else have you been learning during this time?
I've been learning how to connect with people. I know this sounds funny coming from a person that's been in the PR industry, but it's the same thing when it goes with your relationships, with your friend, with your family. As you grow, you change the way that you connect. So I've been trying to find new ways to connect to some of the contacts or clients. I've had more time to speak to them. I pick up the phone now. I'd write them personalized emails that are longer. I'm not in the rush of, okay, I have to get this thing done. I have to have this conversation happen. Actually, the conversations are flowing and I'm taking my time. I'm opening emails now and I'm actually enjoying some of the genuine conversations that are going back and forth. I don't feel like I'm talking to my clients. I'm talking to friends. I've made those relationships. I've been experimenting, I think, as well with skills. Like I said, we've done our first webinar. It's not fancy. It doesn't have a nice logo. The captions are not quite catchy, but at least we've been trying. So if I wanted to do something, it has to be now because I have this time, and then I'll perfect it as I go. So it's really, I think, a lot of like LinkedIn learning, taking new courses, sports. I never had time to do sports, and everyone told me, Fatema, you've always had this time before. This is just an excuse. But it's because, and you know how you and I can be, work takes up most of our hours, and by that time I'm exhausted mentally and physically. But now I'm actually having time to say, 9 to 4 is going to be my work time. Then I'm going to experiment with something new. I'm going to do something new this week. And then I'm going to dedicate some time to some physical activities.
So you've been doing boxing. How has that been?
I love it. In all honesty, I've always been self-conscious when it comes to doing classes. And it's funny because I have an awkward personality and I don't know how to move. My body does not move with my brain. I'm good in writing, I'm good in talking, I'm good in presenting, but tell me to go to a dance class or a Zumba class, it's a completely different Fatema on the platform. So taking boxing and having to be live and being live with a couple of other people on a video to do all these movements, really, I think it kind of like it upped my game a little bit. My confidence got better. I've been physically better, and I've been looking forward to something new. And I have a coach that actually messages me and says, "Where are you? You need to come to this class." And I feel like I have someone pushing me to do something I've never done before. So it's been awesome, to be honest.
I love that you admit that you're awkward, and I just really appreciate your vulnerability. And I've been, I follow you on social media, and I really feel that you're super vulnerable. And especially recently, you've been so open about cravings and food and movies you like. And I'm just watching this other side of you, which is not always like the professional side, it's just your personality. When did you embrace your awkwardness?
I feel like it's helped me separate my work personality and my personal personality, because I feel like a lot of people only see that side of you, but you have a completely different side. And I think that's why you mentioned social media. I remember there's a lot of things I like. I like Asian culture, I like Asian food, I watch anime. And when I talk to other people about that, they're like, "What? You look so serious?" We feel like sometimes you could be, I've heard the word intimidating, because they always see me in a work status or a work culture. They don't really know who I am as a person. And I think when you open up your vulnerability and you tell someone, "Hey, by the way, I do get awkward sometimes. When I'm on stage and you think I'm feeling confident, I'm actually panicking from deep within, but it doesn't show because I have such a good face to put up during this whole time of panic." But if people start to hear that, they feel comfortable. If I'm following a role model and I see her, for example, in her perfectionist moments all the time, it makes me feel like I'm pressured to hold that status. But if I hear that she's also vulnerable, she can also be awkward like me, she also likes different things outside of work, I'm relating to her as a human being. I'm not relating to her for 5 hours of her in a meeting, because that's completely two different people. So I think you need to see the humanistic side of someone to actually appreciate them and to respect them even more.
I think we're the same age, but we're also in similar industries. Have you felt that that has been a negative when you sit with clients who are high-level clients, much older? Do you feel that they perceive this awkwardness or vulnerability as weakness?
Honestly, I feel like it's the opposite. It doesn't work with everyone. I'm not going to tell you that everyone's going to understand, but I feel if some people begin to understand that you're being vulnerable and you're being authentic, they take that as a sign of trust. If I'm here being vulnerable with you, that means I'm comfortable with you. That means I'm not trying to build a client relationship. I'm trying to build a relationship where I'm trying to understand you as a person, because I'm a person and I'm working with another person. I'm not working with your logo. I'm not working with your design team. I'm working with the person, the visionary behind of whatever company that he wants to put forward. So having to be vulnerable on the table is very hard, and you might think that people might not take you seriously. But when I say awkward, I don't mean, do something completely out of the blue and random. I mean, just be you as a personality. And I learned that from you, actually, Wafa. Remember when you said that you wanted to always do a talk where people fold up their, roll up their sleeves, and you can knock on anyone's door, and you weren't scared to kind of speak your mind. But I think that what makes you stand out, because you're authentic. You're not filtering so many of your thoughts. You're not filtering your words. This is me. This is how I talk. This is how enthusiastic I am. And if you're not scared to be that, you can focus on the rest. Because imagine you're sitting with someone and you're trying to have a connection, but the whole time you're thinking, I should sit straight. I should talk about this article. I should mimic that entrepreneur that I saw. Then what is left of you on that table? Then they're not really seeing you. They're seeing what you're trying to be. And I think you're giving them a wrong image that way.
Talking about vulnerability and sometimes being okay with being who you are in whatever shape that looks like, we're two young women running public relation companies. And do you feel that this idea of being authentic conflicts with fake it till you make it? Because for the longest time, I had to be the person that I wasn't necessarily ready to be, but I had to fake it to be taken seriously in the industry until that became the norm. Then those two personalities emerged. So do you feel that sometimes you do have to fake it till you make it and you can't always be authentic, and sometimes you have to put on a mask or put on a persona based on the situation?
This is a very interesting question. And I think what the best thing is to find the perfect balance, which is not always easy. I find myself sometimes, I would go through an event or a meeting and I'd come back being a little bit upset because I'm like, oh, I was vulnerable, I was authentic, but they didn't understand, or things didn't go my way, but they didn't really see through me. This is not what I wanted. And I go back and I realize it's because I assumed everybody else will understand that vulnerability, and that was my first mistake. So then I realized that I have to kind of create a mask. And when I'm saying mask, it's not a fake mask. It's a mask that kind of hides the rest of the stuff that you can use later on. They will come and emerge when you reach into a comfortable point. But you need to fake it till you make it. And the statement seems a bit negative. Like, what do you mean you're gonna fake it till you make it? No, but if you do that, you force yourself to be in a situation and not give yourself time, and you learn from it. Because if you're always gonna be vulnerable and authentic, people will start to take that as a sign of weakness as well. So it's really finding a balance. Like, today I'm gonna put my game mask on, I'm gonna be a bit tougher. I'm gonna try to do things that I've never done. I'm gonna try to speak in a certain way that I've never done before, because it's a learning process. And there's a quote that I like. It's actually a Japanese quote, and it's something that I highly regard. People say that they have 3 masks. One is for your family, one is for your friends, and one is the darkest mask of all. And I think in life you kind of have to filter through these masks, right? And let's just say you'll have to have a work mask. With this certain amount or group of people, I'm gonna wear that mask. But with this certain people that I've initiated that trust, my vulnerability kind of kicks back in. So you'll have to know and navigate when you can do that and when you can't.
You were a country manager for a public relations firm that wasn't based in Bahrain. It was based from Cyprus. And when did you feel it was the right move for you to let that go and to start a company, your company in PR? When was the moment that you realized, okay, I need to do this on my own?
I remember this moment specifically. It was 11 p.m. on a couch. And I talked to my mom and I told her, I have the talent at that time, the certain talents that I felt where I was ready. I had the skills. I've met all the contacts that I needed. And I told her, why can't I do this by myself? And the cliche answer is that I felt ready. You just feel it. And I know that's not an answer a lot of people want to hear, but my experience before that kind of allowed me to run the Bahrain branch. And I was thrown into deep waters with the liberty to exercise my creativity. And I feel like if I kind of alienated myself from that role and started my own thing, I could still make it. So after 4 years, I decided that I wanted to start my own company because I've gained the hard skills. I felt like I needed my own space for the rest. So hard skills are done. And now I feel like I need to exercise my personality within the sector. So I reached the limit of me wanting to do more. So I wrote my resignation letter. I took a deep breath. And I turned the whole page for myself, and that was really it. I felt like I couldn't do more, basically. I needed to have more space for myself.
What are some of the challenges that you didn't foresee when you started your own company? It's so different when I know you almost got an opportunity to practice running your own firm before starting your own company. And what I want to know is, what did you not see coming? Like, oh, this is something I didn't see coming, like in terms of feelings or workload.
Honestly, it's so funny. For some reason in my head, when I quit my job and I started my own company, I thought I'm just going to be sitting and writing press releases, writing great emails. I'm just going to do the copywriting. And then I realized, oh, crap, Fatema, you need to run a business now. You need to have employees. You need to find clients. You need to introduce yourself from this new entity, but you're not really new in the industry, but this entity is new. What kind of messaging do you want? What do you want to focus on? What's your target market? I didn't think about all these things. I just thought, yay, I had the skills. I'm going to start now. Who wants to hire me for their business? But I didn't really think, oh my God, I have a business that's going to be running 24/7, and there's no 9 to 5 anymore for the beginning few months. It's going to be a constant battle of introducing myself now. I'm not working for a company anymore. I'm the CEO of my own company. What do you offer? I don't have a perfect rate card. Oh God, I have to go back and do a rate card. Oh, I have to do the pricing myself. There were so many questions, and it's so funny because you assume that when you start your own business, but my only mistake was that I didn't make a comprehensive plan from the beginning. I was just really too excited and dived in. But it happened within time. Then I started planning per month what I'm going to focus on. Like, this month is going to be finances. The next month is going to be hiring someone. The other month is going to be putting the next 5-month plan of what I wanted to do and what Andra has to be. And once I think that it got easier, once I established what industry I wanted to focus on, what are the clients that I want to serve, and what Andra actually means, what it stands for, and then I think things flowed better. But yeah, running a business is definitely hard. So seeing you for the past 10 years, because I follow you personally on your personal, on Obai and Hill, and there's a lot of things that I learned. You guys are doing a lot of new stuff. I've taken a lot of these things, and I'm also putting my own recipe into them as well.
It is really hard. I wanted to tap into the part about hiring people. So there's this myth about hiring people that, once you have a team, life is easy, work gets done, but then you have people problems, you have HR, you have contracts, you have leave days to approve, and all of a sudden you're dealing with people, their personalities, their moods, finding out what ticks. So for me, the biggest challenge has been managing people, especially in a industry that wants more for less. So my question is, I know you have a compact team right now. I'm sure you're scaling, but have you found the people part challenging, or has it been easy for you?
I guess it's too early on for me to really tackle that question. We're only 2 people actually now. We've had interns here and there, but for me, it was more of, I think managing people will get harder for me once I have a bigger team. But right now, I'm not feeling the pain as much, but I do feel the pain, if I can turn that question around. I do feel the pain of managing clients, for example, because their personalities and the way that they think, it keeps shifting. And I think once I have a bigger team, you have to establish yourself on what kind of leader that you want to be. Because if you're going to be the strict leader from the beginning that says, these are your KPIs, this is what you guys have to do, or you're going to be the person that says, I'm flexible, this is your space, be creative, which can be very tricky as well. And you have to understand that your team will face their own kind of issues. They're going to grow the more time they spend, for example, at Obai and Hill, every month they're going to be changing as a person. You have to see them as human beings and not as employees under our companies. So I think when I have a team, I have to establish what kind of leader that I want to be first, and what kind of assessments that I want them to kind of follow through, and how do I let them have a balance between showing their own personality and also giving back to the company at the same time. So my colleague, for example, and she hears that from me a couple of times. I tell her, okay, I know that you're not comfortable with this, but I'm going to let you try it. Do you want to try this? Or every week I tell her, we're going to have this new event, and do you want to take over? So I kind of give her the freedom to exercise what she wants to do, and the freedom to really say, you know what, Fatema, I don't like this design. Maybe we should do something else. And I listen. Because sometimes I don't see what other people see. So I think giving them that space will make managing people much easier and more fun.
You're right, it's so tricky, and sometimes giving a lot of freedom or having collaborative approach with one person doesn't necessarily work with somebody else. Some people like super clear guidelines. I know some people want to work from home more. Some people need to come to the office because they don't get anything done in the house. So it is quite challenging. And I mean, you learn so much when you start to manage people. I feel like what your organization has done is really positioned itself as a PR company focused on FinTech. That's what I associate it with. But what I want to know is, do you feel that making that decision in such a small market limits you, or especially when clients, they want to work exclusively with you, they don't want you working with their competitors, do you feel like that's limited you or empowered you?
Honestly, at first it felt a bit difficult. The only reason that I focused on FinTech is because it's a much needed sector, and especially now, especially with COVID-19, we've seen how FinTech is thriving and the role of FinTech being even maximized. We, surprisingly till now, we've had maybe 1 or 2 instances of competitors against each other. Like you said, it's a small market, but what we try to do, for example, we would do different things for different clients. So, and each one has a different objective. So before a client comes to us, and obviously they're within the same sector, we ask them, what's your objective? And if we see that whatever activities that we're going to do for that client doesn't clash with the other one, then we both try to make them understand that it's not going to clash, because this is your objective, their objective is different, this is what we want to do. It definitely is harder if I'm focused on one industry, but I wanted to create a niche at first. I'm definitely probably thinking of expanding later on to other governmental sectors. There are several layers to this industry, so it's not very limited in my eyes. There's payments, there's banking, there's cryptocurrency, and not to mention the bigger picture of financial inclusion, diversity of women, being in the Women in FinTech initiative. So all of that kind of ties in. So basically, there's really a lot to do in this industry. We have focused on a few other projects as well. And slowly we'll add new industries once we have a better understanding of what it requires. So I kind of want to up my skill a bit within the sector. And once I feel like I'm ready, and we're practicing for other sectors as well. We've had 3 clients from other sectors, and it didn't work as well as I thought it would, because my experience has always been in financial technology, especially with clients. So I wanted to do a bit I wanted to kind of perfect this sector first before I move into the next, because it does take a lot of my energy to not take clients from every, because I want to give value back to them.
Bahrain has always positioned itself, and different parts of the region as well, as financial sector based, and leaders in this industry. And I personally come from a creative background, and I love working with financial institutions on the creative side, the marketing. It's not necessarily, it can be fun with the right people, but usually it's quite rigid. There's a lot of protocol. It's heavily regulated. Are you enjoying this industry personally, or do you feel like, okay, the opportunity is here? Because I hear you saying things like, I want to get better at it. That's my background. But does it bring you joy, or is this just a good business opportunity?
There's a difference. That's a really good question. See, when you work with banks, and just as banks, that could be rigid, and it can be can give me anxiety and panic attacks sometimes, because you're dealing with a bank, they have a lot of protocols. You can't be creative with their press releases. God forbid, no. But we're talking about FinTech, and financial technology is different because we're working with startups. You get to meet young entrepreneurs, you get to meet different solutions, and each solution is better than the other. And to me, it's so dynamic actually as a sector, because I've met and worked with so many startups before that are fixing gaps, and I've learned a lot. Like we have, for example, one of our clients that is tackling financial literacy, and we're writing their blogs for financial literacy, financial inclusion. We're learning a lot about open banking, for example, and I feel like that's so crucial to our society and ecosystem. So seeing the value that these startups are going to bring to the sector and to the ecosystem and the economy makes me feel empowered that I need to be in this sector. I do enjoy it because I work with young people and startups. I don't work with rigid people. People always thought, oh, financial technology is boring, but they don't understand. The technology part of my clients is the fun part. It's changing. We help them work on solutions. And you know what's very nice for me to do is if someone comes to me and says, hey, I know we're a FinTech startup. I know what we do is kind of boring, but how do we make consumers feel like this is needed, and how can they enjoy it? And for us as a challenge to come up with a way to engage the community for their startup or for their solution makes my life a bit harder, yes, but it makes it enjoyable because not a lot of people can do that. It pushes me to learn better and to be stronger in the sector. So I do enjoy it. I like it. The challenge is there. It's very dynamic.
So you mentioned like we work with startups and young people, and in an ideal world, like when I first moved from London to Bahrain, all I wanted to do was work with a younger audience, people who wanted to take risks, who spoke my language. But the truth is that the funding doesn't come from that space. And a lot of the times we do payment plans and we help out startups. We give them great deals because they tell us their budgets and we really want to help them. And also it's fun and exciting, and it gives my team an opportunity and myself to do something that's more freeing. So my question is, do those startups have the funds, or are you stuck?
We deal with different types of startups. Obviously, the local startups in Bahrain, we do kind of what you do, payment plans. We try to help them out because it's our job to give back to the community and also help the startups thrive. And with our help, we understand that they're new. We understand that they're going to be growing. So we want to be there for them from the beginning of their journey, hoping that we can have that relationship when they get bigger. But our second type of startups are actually startups from outside of Bahrain. So they're actually residents in Bahrain that want to expand in the MENA region. So those people do have the budget. So we balance between those clients. But we also work with a lot of governmental entities that focus on FinTech. So it could be a bank, it could be, for example, kind of like the Central Bank of Bahrain or Bahrain FinTech Bay. Those types of clients we've worked with, for example, helping them on their strategic moves or getting them to get more residents to come to Bahrain and invest, and why Bahrain is such a good place to start your startup. So we do have a mix between governmental startups, international startups, and local startups. So the funds are kind of intertwined between these three buckets, let's just say.
Are you interested in developing your own podcast or your own show? We want to help you make that happen. We can assist you with branding, conceptualizing the concept and theme, writing your intro and shooting it, editing your podcast episodes, developing a podcast schedule and theme, and creating social media content for your listeners and followers. We want you to have your own platform and space to express your point of view. Contact us on obinehill.com or DM us on Instagram, and we'll be here to support you. I want to go back to ValoPay because that's how I met you. And I guess when you talk about your PR company, it makes a lot of sense to understand that you also started a fintech startup yourself and you went through all these stages. And I think actually when you started, I don't believe there was much of an ecosystem back then as much as there is one now. So what's the story of ValoPay? What's happened with it and what has it taught you?
And I'm very comfortable with it because at the end of the day, I came to Bahrain, and at that time I was still working for a startup, and the two people that I was working with told me, "Oh, you're going to Bahrain. The ecosystem is still kind of new. You guys don't have a lot of fintech, tools or solutions, and it's gonna get there. Bahrain is actually gonna be, thriving in that sector." And that was their prediction. And I'm like, "What is fintech? I don't even know." I had to Google it. I had to read the trends. I did a lot of self-teaching, a lot of reading, and I'm like, "This is interesting." And at that time, I used to use Venmo to transfer payments to my friends, Splitwise. I had so many apps in the US. I came back to Bahrain and I realized that we don't have any of them. Now, look how different the things are now, which is so crazy to look back and talk about these things. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to partner up with these two people. I'm going to start my own fintech startup. I'm going to have them help me, and we're going to start ValoPay. Knocked on a few doors, actually started to build it, made it happen, got a few transactions, got clients on board, and it happened. But the thing is, we were focusing on Instagram before Instagram made Instagram payments. We couldn't do a payment gateway like Benefit now. It was too hard for us. We didn't have the funds. I didn't have the connections then. And the ecosystem was not really ready to onboard. And I was too young to kind of say, I'm going to be running a payment gateway. I didn't have a team, and I just moved back to Bahrain. So I was really going through identity crisis while running a startup for the first time. I didn't even know how a startup ran. But I did do it for almost 4 years. And then I decided that, you know what? I studied PR and mass communications. I learned a lot from it. I felt like it was time to let it go. What it taught me, one, if you wanted to try something, please go ahead and do it. Don't be scared of the results or the consequences. And I never call it a failure. I call it an experience because it gave me 3 things the most. I learned a lot about the sector. It made me want to continue in that sector. And it made me realize that, okay, I kind of have a talent for coming up with solutions for fintech, and I understand that. I do have that interest in the sector, but I realized that I'm not a person that wants to run a startup. I kind of wanted to go back to my core. I wanted to do PR and communications. That's what I studied. And then at the end, I realized I could put those 2 things together. I can start my own PR company and I can serve fintech clients because that was my background and that's what I've learned from ValoPay. So being in ValoPay actually made me meet the connections I needed to meet. It made me learn how hard it is, and my heart goes out to all the startup owners because for 4 years, I kind of struggled mentally and physically as well to run and to understand and to keep building my product, to keep hiring people, to know what happens in the back end. There's just so much that people don't understand when you run a startup, and it mentally exhausts you.
Would you consider it a failure? Like, do you talk about it as in it was a failed business, or actually I learned a lot and no regrets and I grew from it? Because I talk about my first business, Sketchbook. I always say it's a failure and everyone's like, don't say that. And I'm like, no, but it didn't generate profit. It served its purpose to me. It led me to creating my agency. And I'm so grateful for it. It was like a stepping stone. But I still say it's a failure because to me, a successful company makes profit eventually. And my digital publication at the time had no business model. There was no revenue generating aspect to it. It was purely content creation.
I think the word you're looking for is necessary failure. So I don't like to term it as failure. I always put necessary before it. And why? Because you need to fail. You need to do things you've never done before because, like you said, it led you to your first client. It led you to another industry. If I didn't do ValoPay, then I wouldn't have been in the place that I am in now. So like you said, exactly, it's a stepping stone. So when people ask me, oh, I can't believe ValoPay failed. I'm like, it didn't fail. It was necessary. I felt like it was meant to be. I was meant to fail in that project so I can do other better and bigger things.
I know that you've had a lot of amazing mentors along the way. I know that the CEO of Paytabs really championed you, mentored you. I don't know if he invested in you. How do you find your mentors? Do they find you? How do you get to a place where these mentors champion you?
I definitely am an asker. I'm not scared to go and sit with somebody, grab a coffee and tell them, hey, I'm starting something new. Can you dedicate like 30 minutes just to talk to me about how you did that? And people actually like to be asked for help. You don't realize that. You think that you're a bother to them. but they're not, because at one point of time, they were exactly like you in the same chair asking for advice. And now you feel like you're empowering them to be the same, to be your kind of mentor. So my first kind of way is like I emailed a personal email telling the CEO, which is Fatemas obviously, and I told him I wanted to try. I was really honest, and he appreciated that. I think people do appreciate your honesty. So I kept updating, and you know what I did? I emailed people at first telling them, hey, so I'm thinking of doing this. I've never met you. Nice to meet you, by the way. But this is what I heard about you, and this is why I think that you'd be the best mentor for me. And let me explain, and I remember my email said, and let me explain to you why I need you specifically to be my mentor. And I listed all the bullet points that I felt could connect us on that level. And then the next step is keep updating them. I would still write an email to Khalid Rumehi, even when I was appointed on the board. I would write emails to him. I'd write emails to the CEO of Paytaps, for example. Hey, by the way, I just started my own company. This is what I've done. We just launched this. And you have to keep that relationship consistent. You need to make them understand that you've actually been very valuable to my life, and you've given me all those insights that I could use. So yeah, you should definitely ask, knock on doors. Don't be scared of the concept. And if someone doesn't want to help you, then you probably don't want this person to be your mentor.
I'm so happy that you're sharing this, and thank you for your honesty and just being so transparent. I did a whole episode on mentorship, and I talk about asking and knocking on doors and exactly what you said, just showing a lot of gratitude and making sure that when you ask for help, you know who this person is, what they're doing, so they can also connect with you and they appreciate you. I used to update some of my mentors regularly. I mean, how often do you do that? Because I also don't want to bombard them every month or two, like, by the way, we have now grown by 30% and I just want to let you know. And like, when do you update them, and when do you take a step back and just let it be and then reconnect when you have to?
Of course, you don't bombard them. Yes, exactly, because then it gets too much. I think you have to realize what your key milestones are. If you remember that certain mentor when when something big happens, or you've won an award, or you've reached a milestone that you think you've never reached, and it suddenly makes you remember that certain person, that if I don't have this conversation with this person, and I want them to know that, by the way, for example, we've expanded to 6 countries, and I just want to let you know, I just want to thank you, like once or twice a year. I just want to thank you because I still remember what you've done for me, and I think you've made that conversation in 2015, for example, had made this day possible. So it's really on key milestones, and I think just to keep that relationship going, whether they reply your email or not, don't think about what their answer is going to be, or don't think about if you're bombarding them, but just think about the key milestones that you want to talk about. If you remember that certain person for an important moment, reach out to him and don't expect a reply. Just reach out to him because it makes you feel good to say, I'm keeping you in the loop with what you've done to my life.
So you said reach out to him twice, him and him. So here's my question to you, and I really want to share my experience as well, but I'm curious to know, are all your mentors, especially in your industry, are they all men, or have you had female mentors as well? Let's be honest. So I've actually never talked about this specific subject in any of my podcasts. So this is interesting.
It's a sensitive question, not because I'm scared to answer it, but I know like a lot of women would love to say that, I've been mentored by women, or my role model is my mom, or my role model is this other woman in the CEO position that made me want to be a CEO. But honestly, my experience, it's not that I've planned it, it just happened by accident. Most of them were men. And I think because I think my personality as well is kind of a little bit manly. The way that I talk to these people kind of brings that out as well. But yeah, my first mentor was a 16-year-old, and he was a boy, and he was like a prodigy in New York, honestly, running a startup, and now he's a lead engineer for Apple, and he's also consulting Google. So this is the first person that I learned with. He was a guy as well. The second one was Paytabs, for example, a couple of board members. And I think the only time that I've met amazing women when I worked for Yalla Banat. So Martina is one of my first female role models, I think I can say. And then after that, I've met amazing people from her. There's a lot of them that I can mention as well. But yeah, I feel like it was men at first because I feel they were because they were black and white, And with women, it's different. I don't know. It's a very weird question. I swear to God, I didn't plan it. It just happened to be. So I was just used to men. Because my dad, I think I talked to my dad more than my mom about business. And I talked to my mom more about personality and the fun stuff of life. So I was just always used to that mindset. Yeah.
It's so interesting because I, like yourself, other than my mom, who I considered my mentor, and actually I talked to my mom a lot more about career progression and work, and she's always championed me. But I had one female mentor in my first job in London, but then after that, all my mentors have been men, and I can switch on and off from feminine to masculine. So when I'm at work and I can definitely be a bit more masculine and have that masculine energy. And all my mentors, the Zaid Zabi, he gave me my first office space on a barter deal for the first 2 years. A lot of my clients who were decision makers, who had the opportunity to sign the checks for my organization, who had decision making power, have all been men. When I did the Women Power Summit, 95% of the people I met, the decision makers, were men. I met one female decision maker, and she didn't even have the authority to release payments. She had to request it from abroad, where their mother company was. And I just find it so much easier to have men be more accessible. I also think a lot of the women decision makers or leaders are so busy because they also have work and family. They're a lot more involved with their children. And I'm not trying to generalize, this is just my experience only. So I feel they have a limited pool of where they can put their time. It's not something I talk about. It's not to say there aren't any female mentors and women who are available to coach. But it's the way my life has turned out as well. It's always been men at the forefront, mentoring and client-wise. It's quite crazy.
The first few females that I thought, oh wow, I'm starting to look up to these women. It was so weird for me because I was always talking to men, and men are different. You email them, they reply with a clear-cut answer. You knock on their door, come back, I'm busy right now, but you can message me later. Like, they had answers that were happening within minutes. With women, it was different. You needed to connect on an emotional level. You had to sit down with them. There was a different kind of friendship or relationship that you have with men versus women. So I think mentorship from females, we talked about life, we were personal, it was more tailored and customized to what we were going through. But with men, we didn't really talk about anything personal. It was just about how can we better each other? Like, what do you need from me? What do I need from you? This is the value. It was two different ways of doing things.
I want to talk about you as a board member for the EDB. You are the youngest female board member in Bahrain. So let me tell you about that experience when I heard the news. So I was so happy to know someone that got this position personally. Like, I know you personally, but also I was so happy to see this massive change because, as you know, women are a minority on board members, even more so in this part of the world. And to have a young woman who doesn't fit the usual board member type. So, it's very hard to find single women as board members, young women in their 30s, and women who are, at the time you were an employee of PR companies, so not necessarily fitting either the family business type or of women that get invited onto these boards. So you have a lot of validation from your family as a family business owner, but also not really working in an organization on a high level position or a manager representing a corporate company you were. It was so different than what you would usually hear. I was really surprised to see a lot of people get really upset by the news. Like, who is Fatema Ebrahim? What makes her ready for this role? Why her? What did she do to get this position? Really negative. Why are people kicking a fuss? So what I want to know is, did you hear this news? Did it bother you? How was that for you?
Honestly, the way it happened was unexpected for me as well. And I did hear this. This is not the first time, but it's good to hear it back again because I kind of wanted to talk about something like that, especially on this podcast, since we're being very open and authentic. It's very intimidating. It did upset me at first. I spent first month or two, and I've had people close to me as well come up and tell me, it's just a weird decision. Like, why? But what did you do? And then I realized that if I had given in to that doubt, to that fear, I would have really not been able to go to that boardroom for the first time and be confident. I would have been like, oh my God, everyone's telling me that I'm not ready, that I shouldn't have had this, and I had 50-50, obviously. I had people that were happy for me, and you were one of them. And I had people that were confused, and I had people that were upset, whether they told it to my face or without it. But I had to really prepare myself mentally. I sat down with myself, I really think for a good 2 or 3 weeks, and I told myself, Fatma, look back at what you've done. You're not going to please people no matter what position you got or you didn't get. And no matter what you do in life, no one's going to give you that 100% satisfaction or be happy for you. And it's so funny, like you said, it was upsetting because if people wanted change and that was the first step of change and that still upset them, then in my head I was like, let them be upset, because I don't have to explain myself. I think I've done good for myself in the past 2 years before that appointment. I worked really hard. I tried. And whoever decided to put me into that position and put their trust in me, my job was not really going back and explaining to people, by the way, this is why I'm going to do good. By the way, this is what you're going to see. I'm going to prove it to you. I didn't have to prove anything to anybody. What I had to do is really prove myself to myself, and also prove to the board that they made a good decision, because there are things that I can contribute, and I had to ask myself, what can you contribute? What do you think led you there? And I think it's because I created a niche, I communicated, I wrote a lot of articles for a lot of magazines, I mentored startups, I started my own startups regardless of failing or not. But I put myself out there. I remember going on my first official delegation I think 1 year before my appointment, with the whole of the EDB team. That's when I first met Khalid Ramehi and a lot of high-level people, and this was my first experience. And I think that I did pretty well for myself on my first delegation. I sat with people, I asked them questions, I asked them, what gaps are you facing? What can we fix? What can I do? Can you give me a project to work on? So I put myself out there, and I'm proud of myself to have put myself out there. And I think the first year of being on the board, it was very hard mentally, because every time I would go into that room, I'd be like, okay, well, I want to say this, but I'm not sure if I'm right. I want to ask them if I can work on this part, but I'm not sure. The second year I got stronger, and I realized, you know what? There are people, some board members on the table that have said exactly the things that I've wanted to say, but I just didn't have the courage to say them the first time. And then it just kept getting better and better. But I feel for women especially that are young on these boards, mentally really just sit with yourself and tell yourself and look back and reflect. You have done enough, whether to get you to this position, and you have to own it. You have to really own it, and you can't listen to anybody else, because not everybody will like you, not everybody will be happy for you, and that's a fact of life. So you have to think of what got you to a certain place or achievement, and look back at all the milestones that you've done. We as people don't reflect on the good things as human beings. We like to attach ourselves to the misconceptions and stereotypes, and that's what eats you up alive. So if you look at your skills, your value, your experience, nothing can take that away from you. So the rest is all in your mind. Everything else is tangible.
This podcast is brought to you by the Women Power Summit. The Women Power Summit is an annual event that hosts more than 2,000 guests to listen, learn, and network with more than 100 plus speakers and industry leaders. The summit creates space for growth, learning, discussion, and collaboration, with the means of creating a space where women can support each other, ask questions, be curious, and be inspired. Did you feel that it affected how you positioned yourself? Do you feel that as a board member in this institution, when you post on social media, do you wear that hat? Like, oh, I'm a board member, so this is what I should be posting, but actually I'm going to post my funky socks.
I think this is the most thing that I've struggled with, and I still struggle with. But to be honest, one day I'll be looking at other people's Instagram profiles who are also board members, and I'd be like, oh, wow, they have entrepreneur in their description, they post like awesome things, it's always valuable, there's nothing personal at all. Like, that's their personality online, that's personality offline, unless you bump into them into a random setting. And then I realized that when you look even outside of Bahrain, what I've seen that is healthy for me, and I've seen from other examples that I like, they separate the two. For example, when I start posting my movies or anything that's not very board-like, member-like, online, I've seen ministers actually like those posts sometimes that are following me, and I realized maybe I'm thinking too much about it, but I needed to make that separation. Well, honestly, I had to make that separation to feel healthy, because Andra PR is my official page for what I'm doing. It's personally, when I write columns for the newspapers, or I write, that's just me, and everyone knows me as me from my public relations company, from my activities, from how I meet them, and they know that I'm very serious, and I'm gonna leave it to that. But anything personally for me, that's my social media, for example, my own personal Instagram, is really gonna be just for me, and I've made that decision firmly, especially mid last year, and I wanted to stray away from that. And actually, I just deactivated my Instagram just to take a break and breather, and I could do whatever I want, honestly, online. But obviously, you have to be careful. If you made your decision to have a professional and entrepreneurial persona, even online, then you need to stick with that, and that's the decision you've made. My decision is I needed to separate it. I needed one where I can unleash my creativity, my personality in that way, because my friends are online. My global friends are online. There are so many things that I want to share that is not just work, work, work all the time. If I was just putting work stuff on my social media, for example, and then working on my Andra PR, and then 9 to 5, it becomes like I don't have any flavor just for me. So I did separate that, and whether the criticism comes in or on and off, you just have to stand up for yourself and say, well, there's board members that like to have an official page, and there's board members that like to share anime. So you're gonna have to choose one.
I always think it's brave to do that, because I do feel there's like a double standard, and I feel like especially for women, when they do get these roles, they're more scrutinized, they're more held to a much higher standard, or they're held to different rules than men do.
Like you said, we're young women on boards, and young women have other interests. And if you realize, a lot of high level people that I know, when you look at their social platforms, they post themselves going fishing, planting, gardening. But when women feel like they can't share these things because it feels like, no, I have to be serious, I have to be taken seriously. But no, the answer is you have to be you. If this is what you like posting, if this is what you want to do, then do that, because people will respect you for being you eventually. And if they don't, they will learn to do that with time. Or you just have to respect yourself at the end of the day. But it's a choice that you have to make.
What were some of the earlier mistakes you've done as a board member? What have you really learned about communication or about how things work?
I was too afraid to speak on a solution or contribute to the conversation. The first few months, I was like, I don't know. I don't know what's appropriate. That table felt so big, and everyone on that table felt like I was sitting with giants, and I was so small, and I felt like honestly, I was my worst critic, because I felt like everybody was looking at me thinking the thoughts of, oh, she's young, she's probably going to be too scared to say something. What is she going to say? We've been running businesses. We've been in the sector for so many years. One person was a VP, one person owns a family business for 40 years. I couldn't measure up to that. But then I realized that I don't have to measure up to that, because I'm not one of, they brought me specifically for this board position because I'm young, because I don't have all of that. So I had to really say my diverse advice from my perspective. If I don't do that, and I start mimicking every other board member and trying to be exactly like them and talk in the way that they're doing, then what's the point of having me on that board? The diversity issue completely goes out the window if I don't start acting my age, if I don't start saying things that I feel is right. Like sometimes I remember I would have so many answers when they were asking questions during the board, and I find myself like my throat, like it wouldn't work. I wouldn't say anything till the end of the meeting. And then slowly I realized that when the board members started answering that question, they had similar answers. It's just that I was too afraid. I was too afraid to put my opinion out there, because I made up these misconceptions of what they could be thinking about me, but no one really said anything. So after that, I started opening my mouth and being like, this is exactly what I want to do. This is what I want to say. This is what I recommend. And when I first saw the first person nod their head saying, that's a good idea, Fatema, let's write that down. And I realized, wow, that was the first step to everything else.
What have you learned about how things are done in this town from that experience?
Let me see if I can do the most important lesson that I've learned from this. I feel that we assume too much sometimes, and honestly, it's not as bad as you think it is. we assume too much. I've assumed a lot. I always assume this person thinks that way, or that client feels that way, or if I read a certain email and I feel like the tone is off, I did a bad job or I did something wrong. I feel like when people start talking about mental health well-being, I never really realized how important that was. There were times, like you said, you asked that question, do you feel sometimes like no matter what you've been doing, you still feel kind of lost and you feel like you're not enough? I've learned that you really have to grow as a person mentally before you can tackle a lot of things in life. You have to sit down and talk to yourself, really. Before you start assuming the worst, talk to yourself and actually put yourself guarded. Make yourself a little bit guarded on that pedestal and say, don't think anything bad. You're new, you're trying, you're experimenting. There is nothing perfect. You're not aiming for perfection. You're aiming to try and to make things happen. And whatever happens later on, you will deal with the consequences. But I've learned to really stand your ground and to be mentally strong are the two most important things for anyone to be a good leader. It's not how many clients you have. It's not how much money you make. It's really how strong you stick and you continue to be strong and put that effort into your mind when the time goes on.
Have you ever had any feelings of imposter syndrome? Especially, I guess, with the board position. Did you feel, oh God, I'm not qualified, I'm not worthy? Or even when you deal with clients, we're going to start working with you. Are you really going to start working with me? Have you had any of those moments?
And out of all your questions, this to me hits home. So of course, I get those feelings quite often, and you always will. But I've learned, and I'm still learning, to stop them or letting them take over my whole day. Everyone gets those feelings, but people mask their feelings in different ways. So I've become aware that my mind can be a dangerous place. Sometimes it's because it feeds off certain emotions that I've allowed it to feed on, but this is the key word, I am always in control, and it takes a lot of practice. And soon you won't let these thoughts creep in, because instead you'll have thoughts like, instead of saying, oh, you didn't do well today, it could be something like, well, I feel like I need a break today. Or I'm not doing well. It could be, for example, I'm not doing my best now, but I'll try harder tomorrow. So it's really kind of doing that. And I remind myself that I'm in the growth stage and I'm in a process of learning and experimentation. And a lot of people, what they do, they link themselves to role models at their ends. This person's already successful, he's a billionaire, he's made it happen, but they don't link themselves to this entrepreneur role model at their beginnings, because you are at the beginning. So you need to link yourself to how their process was when they first started. And I also tell myself that I'm aware that I am the worst critic and I'm being tough on myself. So this is how I deal with this kind of syndrome.
I think positive affirmations, just like you said, are life-changing. I've been posting some affirmations and I'm getting so much feedback. I think I found my thing on Instagram, the thing that I like to do that people just also really are getting value from. And ever since I started my firm, I think for the longest time, I've always been very hard on myself, just pushing myself, being tough on myself, being rough with me, just like really aggressive. And just recently, I'd say in the last 6 months to a year, I've been much more gentler with this voice in my head. And I'm just like, it's okay, you didn't get this right, but not everybody gets it right. And tomorrow you can try again. How do you keep up with this industry? What are some of your tactics or techniques to stay on top of it?
Well, first I tell myself, you can't learn everything today or tomorrow or the day after. It could take months, it could take years. So I break them down. Especially for FinTech. When I talk to clients, if I talk to a startup that's about cryptocurrency, I can't sit there and be like, okay, I'm going to go learn everything I have to do about cryptocurrency. He has to know that I'm really well versed in this and I know everything. I can't, because I have new clients all the time, for example, and they're from new industries. They have new solutions all the time. Like I said, it's dynamic. But what I try to do, I do my best. Each week, I dedicate a few hours to learning something within the industry. So we try to kind of make it seem as a weekly goal so we don't burn out. This is how it is. You have to just pace yourself.
Have you ever been to meetings where someone is schooling you, do you know what this is? And do you know what that trend is? And you're like, I have no idea. And you felt really small.
I answer honestly but you know what? You can always turn it around with your answer. I've had someone actually a couple of times, and I'd be like, honestly, I don't know what you're talking about, or I don't understand the specific idea. But if you give me the time to come back to you and actually do my own research, I promise you that our next meeting will be more valuable and I'll contribute a bit more. but I don't go and I don't try to fake it as I make it during a meeting and tell them that I know all these things, because it will show this person's a professional. He's been dedicating his life and his time to this project, to this sector. You don't want them to know that you're bluffing, because you want them to, it's either being honest or it's either lying and allowing them to catch you through your lie. So it's better to just say, you know what, I don't know, but I'm going to come back to you. And if you do come back, that's great. And if they don't, well, then you'll have to make sure that you have a research going on better before your meetings.
Being in PR, I feel like our jobs are really intense. We are always available to our clients, like you said in the very beginning, which is something I truly believe in, and I live by it, and I really try to pass that on as part of our culture in our company, that our clients are our friends. And if we merge that relationship, working with them becomes also so much more exciting and relaxing, and it's enjoyable for them as well. And when I met you, I felt that, you gave me workaholic vibes, and I felt that because I also work all the time. I think up until my pregnancy last year, it was 12 to 16-hour days, and it's a lifestyle, because I have to, I think if you want to scale, you do have to take on a lot, and then you have to be there for each individual client, and like you said, we have to do the learnings and integrate that in our week. So my question is, have you ever felt that you were a workaholic? Two, do you feel that you're still in that space where you were putting in the same amount of hours, or have you found I don't know if there's such a thing, but more of a work-life balance?
Workaholic was the word, and I realized that, for example, I wasn't sleeping well enough. I could have been healthier. I could have enjoyed a lot of more moments with my family, especially when I was here. And then I realized that I walked around with my laptop everywhere. Clients could call me at midnight and I'd still pick up my phone. That's because I didn't set the boundaries. And I met you several times, and I said this one time in my head, I think both me and Wafat have trouble switching off. And like you get my vibe, I got yours. But I realized that it's within my control, and I wish I realized that sooner. I did make that balance now. You set the boundaries on what or who should take time from you, and people will have to learn to accept that. You can't be, and anyways, I think you can't be your fullest if you don't make your time rich with the necessary elements like sleeping, eating well, connecting with friends. And of course, there are days where you have to drag yourself till the end, but make those days a rare case. Don't make them every day. Because the 24/7 hustle, honestly, that's being communicated is very wrong. I personally feel like it drains you, and it allows for more room for failure. You have to communicate to yourself that you have two jobs, one that pays and one that takes care of you. Because if you can't take care of you, you cannot do the job. So the best advice I've ever received, honestly, learn how to work smart. And this will take time, so you can live better and you could do better.
What if your clients are always switched on? So this is, again, and I totally get what you're saying. And sometimes it sounds good on paper, but if those marketing managers of those organizations are available to their CEOs and for their product, and they're launching multiple products and they're competing all the time, if they're always switched on, they expect a partner who's also switched on. So how do you set those boundaries without upsetting them?
Maybe you don't upset them. Maybe you have the conversation, say, hey, I know that this is the product launches, but you kind of make them feel like you're going to give them a new way of working together. I know this is going to take a few hours, but let's just say if we separate in these 4 product launches in the next 6 months, if we dedicate those amounts of hours, and this is how we want to work together, so then we can focus on this, and then the next week we can do that. And you make them realize that if you put a good plan for time management and project management all together, and you make them realize that they can actually do all of this without impeding on each other and creating pressure for everybody around them, they get to see the beauty. Maybe you get to teach them something through that. Because I had a client that used to call at midnight all the time, was always switched on, and I didn't know what to tell them. I was like, and then at some point I got tired. I told them, when you call me at midnight, it's not that I'm available sometimes at midnight, but sometimes, I'm tired. I'm not going to give you the best answer. I'm going to rush through our conversation. So whatever you're going to get out of me in that phone call is not the best. Why don't you call me back after I had my first coffee at 8:30? Then I could be able to contribute more. Or why don't we do 2 product launches instead of 4? So sometimes I feel like you have to speak out and make some boundaries, but not only to help you, to help them as well. Because sometimes they need to hear that from you. You don't realize, maybe that marketing manager is also stressed like you, always switched on, and he needs somebody else as a partner to be like, We both need to slow down so we can help each other more.
How has the reaction been when you've had that? That sounds like a tough conversation to have.
One worked, one didn't. The one that didn't, I realized, okay, they're a good client of mine, and that's just the style that they're gonna look for, and I have to kind of suck it up, Fatma. You know, like if you can be switched on with one client, but do not be switched on with 10 clients. It's too much. So you need to have the conversation, see who's willing to accept and see who's not willing to accept, and then kind of balance that. Because, you know, like you said, it's easier on paper, but to get it done, you have to have that conversation. Hey, you know, as you know, we're a small company, we're 2 people, we work from 9 to 5. Anything urgent, we would love to help you, but anything that can wait, we would be better to serve you in the mornings, because that's when we dedicate our time to all our clients one by one to see what we can catch up on.
Do you foresee doing this forever? Is this what you're going to be spending the rest of your life doing?
I do want my company, obviously, to grow bigger. I want to have more people. I want to have a bigger team. I don't know where I want to expand yet. I kind of want to still solidify my position in Bahrain, and I want to add new sectors within the next 2 years and see how well I do with them. And honestly, besides my company, I want to think of one fun activity or project, like opening a small coffee shop or opening a noodle bar, adding 2 more sectors, having at least 10 people join us by the end of the next year, probably. So little milestones, hoping that each one is gonna pave through. But yes, getting bigger and better, but not bigger and better in a way where I'm like, I'm gonna be a multi-million-dollar company by the next year. Definitely not. No, I just want to add 2 sectors. I want to have 10 people for the next 2 years, and maybe think about what fun project that I want to start for myself. Yeah.
You know, what do you think the future of PR is?
I've read so many articles. Like I said, I'm doing Thursday Trends, and this is my answer to your question. We've seen media has changed several times, and it will always keep changing, and that's why our jobs are always hard. They can never be stable. It's never stagnant, but it's also the fun part of it. But I think it's the most dynamic industry because now we're all moving online. Most of our activities are online. Print is slowly dying, and there's so much that you can do in the digital sphere. So I think the podcast, the webinars, the virtual meetings, we've moved all our events virtually, and I think it's the best thing ever. We're globally connected more than ever, and we're forced to be globally connected now, especially now. So we're looking at a hybrid. The world is turning to be a virtual reality that is diverse, complex, more accessible. So really, we're interacting with media on a much larger scale. So I would have to say, yes, it's going to be a hybrid way of dealing with media. It's going to be virtual for sure, and people are going to have to interact globally, and they're going to have to be accessible all the time. So this is in a nutshell what I think the future of media is going to be.
This was wonderful. I enjoyed just getting to know you on a different level. That's it for this week. Thank you for listening to an episode of the Women Power Podcast. And thank you for downloading and streaming our podcast every week. If you love what you've heard, tag us on Instagram and follow the Women Power Podcast and Women Power Summit account for more information on our next episode. Please leave a rating review wherever you get your podcast. It really helps other women discover the show. That's it from me. See you next week.